Hi, I'm James E. Welcome to this episode of Roar, and we want to speak up and speak out. If things are not going the way you think this country should, we have a vote and we should use it. But right now, people are afraid and intimidated, and if enough people speak out, like in No King's Day, for example, there's nothing to fear. Because what's right about this country can fix what's wrong with it. At least I think so. And I'm going to bring on Rick Rosner. Rick, what do you think? Do you think there's something?
I spoke out this freaking morning about the SCOTUS decision, 8-1, reversing Colorado's ban on conversion therapy. Conversion therapy is pray away the gay. That is, you think your kid's gay, or your kid tells you they're gay, and you drag them into some Christian shrink who, tries to talk them out of being gay, which doesn't work and makes the kid feel like shit. Right? So the ruling said that you can't ban that it's freedom of speech. You can go to a therapist, and the therapist is free to fuck with your kid, as long as they don't do nipple clamps or any kind of physical torture to try to make the kid not gay. And I said cruel bullshit from SCOTUS, allowing charlatans to make gay kids hate themselves. Pray away the gay doesn't work, hurts kids. And I got piled on by the other side. And I actually kind of rethought my original response, which might have been too strong, because I can understand the First Amendment arguments.
Right.
So, and I said, all right, I'm backing away from that a little bit, but it didn't stop every jagoff in the world from coming after me and saying that the FBI should check my hard drive and that I'm in favor of kids chopping off their dicks. And the whole thing is pretty demoralizing. And by the way, the dick surgery, brutal surgery, done according to the studies I've seen, and they're old, so I don't know what the most recent studies are, but well under 1% of trans people get bottom surgery because it's expensive, it's painful, it requires a lot of maintenance. It's brutal. Yes, certainly isn't done and shouldn't be done for anybody under 20. My wife's friend's kid had the surgery, but she's in her 30s. And I remember, growing up in Colorado, we knew about the one guy who was in the old days who was doing the surgery down in Pueblo, Colorado. And, to get surgery from him, you had to move to Pueblo and live as a woman for a year before he would agree, get a job as a waitress or something. And before he would do the surgery. So, it's not something that, anyway, the whole thing kind of bums me out. And I'm almost sad that I weighed in at all.
Yeah, it is a complicated thing that, I think I would come down with SCOTUS on the right of them to practice what they believe. But you are inflicting a great deal of damage. And this is the parents that are at fault here, because with the child who believes that they're one, I believe in the power of belief. And why can't they be supportive? And again, minus surgery, but when you're young, but the idea that you can be supportive of someone of their choices, their expression of themselves, seems to me to be a fundamental aspect of parenting. And, I believe that people have the right to practice. A therapist has the right to practice this if they believe that this would help. And so I'm no longer sure of what will help someone in such a dire strait as I once was. Yet the idea of people feeling unsupported is it's harmful not only to that person, but to society at large.
Yeah,
And
and like a kid who's struggling with their sexuality, by all means, should talk to a therapist if they're amenable. Maybe even if they aren't amenable, but it should be a therapist who's not going to fuck them up worse.
and it should be one that is supportive of
Yeah,
that.
I mean, there are plenty of issues for kids, regardless of their orientation, growing
Right.
up. How not to be taken advantage of sexually, and oh shit, what I was going to say. Well, I have sympathy for. Now, I didn't talk about trans kids at all. The people who jumped on me were saying I was talking
Assuming.
about
Yeah.
trans kids.
Yeah,
And
people's reading comprehension skills have suffered in the last
Right.
couple of decades.
Yeah, no, the average IQ of everybody on Earth has been dropping for the past decade. We've outsourced our thinking to our devices. The same way, like wolves are smart, dogs not so smart, because when we domesticated dogs, they outsourced their thinking to us. Now dogs don't understand shit. But we just take care of all their needs. But anyway, with the pray away the, I mean, I'm sure I bet you most people know a heterosexual married couple where you can't believe the husband isn't gay. He gives off all this, but that's people's right to. Maybe the husband is gay, but they're still in a happy marriage, and the wife is like, yeah, I when I'm asleep, he might be looking at stuff, and people
And they're
do.
still capable of raising well-adjusted children, and that's always my bottom line.
Yeah, and I have sympathy for trans issues because, in a way, I'm trans in that I engage in hyper-masculine drag. I wanted to be a tough guy, right? So I started lifting weights like crazy. I did some steroids in my 20s. I thought that tough guys had scars, so I sliced a bunch of scars into them. I won a Rambo lookalike contest.
Wow.
In the 80s because I was ripped and I was covered. I gave myself scars before Rambo had scars, but in the same place. I art directed my scars, and I did such a good job that when they picked out where Rambo should have scars, they had them in the same place.
Oh, man.
But that's insanity, taking a razor blade and slicing yourself. So you look, so like I understand, gender conforming behavior, right? Where you want to turn yourself into the person you think you are and you want to be.
And also the people that it sounds like the people you think people expect you to be. And trying to live someone else's perception of who you are is never a recipe for success, only acceptance of yourself. And this is the thing that I balk at when people come out as gay, come out as anything that is not typical in society. They get pushback.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
My wife worked in a couple fancy private high schools in LA. And at the second one, because the era as we were rolling into where trans stuff was, it peaked a few years back, right? Trans awareness and the noise about trans. And there was certainly some social contagion around trans in this high school where, if I'd been going to this high school, like when I was in high school, I tried everything to try to get a girlfriend. To have a girlfriend who'd give me a hand job or something. It was like social affirmation. My whole self-esteem, self-image was based on I wanted to become cool enough to get a girlfriend. And if I'd gone to this high school where my wife worked, I certainly would have worn nail polish, right? And I would have swanned around because that would have been my strategy to get a girlfriend. Probably the fey guys who were very trans accepting, they probably got to get closer to women. So I would have had a creepy agenda.
Ah,
And certainly at this high school, there were people who considered themselves non-binary, who in later life will be perfectly fine with being one gender. But it was but how much damage does it do? So okay, so you frickin' you decide that you're non-binary in high school. You're a girl who makes out with a girl or two or five, and then you settle down and maybe you decide that's not your thing. I mean, there are plenty of straight girls who, stereotypically make out with other girls at frat parties, right? Because guys think it's hot. There's lots of reason for, and does it damage
I think
people?
it's hot when they fight too.
Yeah.
The guys are, first much. But the idea here, there's so many women that I've talked to that confess, but they don't feel the social stigma of experimenting in college. That's what I've heard a lot. But like the guy's reaction is sort of like, oh, that's cool, and because they're trying to picture it, and women seem to be more understanding, and it doesn't have the pushback, for example, of trying to be your authentic self in high school, for God's sakes, with so much pressure anyway.
And then there's the other side, like how tainted are you as a guy, as a straight guy, if you have made out with a couple dudes?
Yeah,
like
I know you don't think that's hot. Yeah.
No, but like when I was in college in my 20s, like I said, I was always desperate to get a girlfriend. And one of the hottest girls I knew, I could have made out with because she would flirt with me. But she was trans. And I knew her, but only at night, because she had a regular job where he would, he was a guy during the day. At night, she'd, be trans, 6 foot tall, stacked, long red hair, super hot, hotter than any girl I could have pulled, any other girl I could have pulled. And, I was tempted to go out, to go out in the parking lot because I was working so I bounced a bunch of bars in Boulder, and I used to be a bigger guy. And then I had a fight with my girlfriend, who was also a bouncer, and I had to leave one bar for a while because there was a big war between the bouncers, and I got a job in a gay bar for a while because it was. So I'm bouncing this gay bar, and this hot 6 foot redhead, was flirting with me, and I'm like, I really should. I wanted to go out in the parking lot and make out with her, but I didn't want to deal with her dick. I didn't, and like 40 years later, if it were now, I'd be like, probably like, all right, I get to make out with a hot girl. Do I have to touch her dick? All right, fine. I've touched a dick 15,000 times. It's been my own dick, but it's like, how much worse can it be?
It's funny. You reminded me of when in 1978, my friend and I drove out to California, but his sister was working in New Orleans, and so we stopped there. And we're going out on the town, so to speak, in Bourbon Street, and we're having Long Island iced teas. No, hurricanes. which is
Right.
basically
Yeah.
the same kind of
It's
thing.
basically the same thing. It's like
Yeah.
four heavy shots in a glass.
And so I'm feeling the effects, and this one girl is staring at me, and she's beautiful. You know, she's just really, and I can't imagine why she's staring at me. But every time I look over, she's staring at me. And so I'm starting to work up the courage to go approach her. And the bartender leans over and says, "That's not a woman." And I was shocked. And, you know, I don't know today if I would be as shocked. Well, I know I wouldn't be as shocked. The thought wouldn't have occurred to me back then. And, you know, so, you know, something in me tells me that there is being progress made. And the idea of conversion therapy is a flashback to the past, but it's still here. And it still needs to be addressed. And it needs to be addressed by saying that that is not socially acceptable.
Yeah. So here, I'll read comments. So I came out against this SCOTUS ruling, though. On second thought, you know, First Amendment, people can do, you know, what they want as long as they're not. So this ruling was a big blow against the religious ideology of cultist zealots like me, like Rick, who want to make gay kids hate themselves by transing them. So me being against this ruling, somehow everybody is saying, yeah, you just want confused kids to cut their dicks off, which is bullshit.
Well,
but that's what I get for roaring.
Make. You know, it's not a logical conclusion to draw. It's based on a false assumption, which means that no matter how well you reason after that, your conclusion will be false. But you know, it doesn't seem to me that they have the capability of applying logical thinking, making that sort of jump to, you know, you're pro-trans, you're pro.
So when I see a comment like this, I'll usually go to the rest of their feed and see if they're an asshole consistently,
or just on this one.
Some of people, there's a lot of sportification of politics on X, where a lot of reply guys, like if somebody says you're a fucking, you know, beta cuck asshole, I'll go to their feed. And if it's all like Alex Jones and Tucker Carlson and you know, then I'll mute him. But if I go and it's 80% sports and the guy is just giving people shit because they're, you know, they like the Red Sox or you know, that they're calling people names about sports, I'm like, all right, this is just a guy who's a fan of certain things and he's going to be nasty, you know, semi-anonymous. So that guy doesn't deserve a mute. He's just, you know, cheering for his team.
Yeah. Yeah. And people have a right to their opinion, even, you know, and I had a show, Change Your Mind, where it was like, you know, we're always trying to change someone else's mind, and we never give much thought to changing our own mind. And so we have to be, and you just were an example of that when you rethought your first post about the 8-1 decision, because, you know, you thought that about the First Amendment. So, you know, that's capable. You're capable of changing your mind. Many of these people are incapable of changing their minds. They have not yet developed the capacity to self-reflect and to learn and to grow. And so when I see someone like that, what I move towards is more, I'm sorry for them. Then I want to respond and make them, you know, hate me more, which was the way I used to be. And I would engage in that. We called them flame wars back in the 90s. And, you know, I would start them if there was one that was starting for me, because I was so convinced in the rightness of my position. And I'm less convinced now, although there are still some things that I still value, and I think they're core principles. And I will still push back even if there's, you know, I have, and it's a sports thing, but I'm in a chat group, a very selective chat group. It's you know, 9 sports fans in New York City, and me, and and they have some groupthink and they pile on, and I'm often like the only voice saying the opposite, and they start to self-police themselves, like, hey, let's dial it back a bit here, and they've demonstrated the ability to grow. And
there's satisfaction going both ways. You can be a super dick. Like sometimes I'll like say you're just a cult boy, and then I'll say muted, and then I'll mute them, and then I'll never hear from them again because they can't get in touch with me. And so there's satisfaction in saying something back. And there's also satisfaction in like finding reasonable people and making connections across, political. Like this one lady gave me some shit, and then I went to her feed, and she said the only time that that 5-year-olds think about gender is if somebody has been grooming them, which isn't true. If a kid is strongly trans, because I don't know many examples, but kids, not every kid, but some kids know that their orientation is a certain way early on, but certainly by 5 years old. So it's not true that it's only if somebody's grooming them. I mean, I was jerking off starting in 9 because I was a geek, right? I didn't have sports to distract me. And I read everything. I was an early reader. And so I found like dirty stuff. And I found out that even at age 9, some dirty material gave me a boner. And I'm like, what is this? What's going on? And, I explored having a boner. And it wasn't anybody was grooming me. I found dirty stuff to read.
And there's many beautiful women who will tell me that growing up, they were tomboys.
Yeah. So, I mean, like models, a lot of models were tomboys because when you get your boobs come in with estrogen. When you get estrogen, that stops your bone growth. If you're a tomboy and you don't get your boobs till you're like 18 or 19, well, that's what happens to a lot of fashion models who end up being like 5'11", 6'1". They didn't get their estrogen till later. They just kept growing up, and they ended up with like a supermodel body, which is, a zillion feet tall. Anyway,
that's really interesting to me. That's not something I've thought about too, because I watched the WNBA, and I've been season ticket holders to Stanford women's basketball for 15 years or so, and there are a lot of tall, athletic women, and I look at them as
a lot of the times they're not gifted in the boob direction. Like Brittany Griner, there's the one she's like 6'8". She was kept prisoner in Russia for bullshit reasons, right?
Correct.
There's footage of her hanging out in her backyard, just wearing bikini bottoms, playing, pool basketball and stuff. And everybody in the comments is like, she's a dude. She's a dude. Because she doesn't have boobs. No, it's she's 6'8". It goes along with not having boob it used to be, I guess, in the old days in the 50s, if you were a girl and you were getting past 5'10", you and your parents might be freaking out, because how are you going to get a man if you were so tall? They would blast you with estrogen and stop you from growing.
Wow.
So anyway, there's all
learning something new. I did not know that.
Yeah. So there's all this. I'm bummed out about all this stuff. And I'll probably have to get in there and either pull my original comment or add another comment where people can see it and say, look, I've been replying to people, I came on too strong, but nobody's noticed it because they're too busy giving me shit. Anyway, another thing that bummed me out that I was thinking about, which is how this entire, the 21st century was supposed to be good, right? We were supposed to, if you look at how science fiction presented the future, we're supposed to be living on the moon, flying cars, like if you look at how Star Trek presents, I don't know, the 22nd, the 23rd century, everybody gets along. They walk, anytime like the crew returns to Earth, which they briefly do, to it's like these wide open plazas with beautiful, swoopy skyscrapers. And the 21st century is not living up to it. It's pretty grimy and shitty. Everybody's pissed at each other. We've got these ridiculous wars. And I was thinking about how so much of our century has been shaped by horny guys wanting to jizz. And let me give you the jizz history of the 21st century. It starts with Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton had to get the jizz out with Monica Lewinsky, right? And he gets caught. Gore is kind of disgusted with Clinton. Clinton was still very popular because most Americans thought that the Republicans effed him over, right? With the impeachment for lying about a BJ, right? So still very popular, but Al Gore was self-righteous and was like, oh, you defiled the Oval Office, didn't use him enough on the campaign trail, loses narrowly to Bush. If he'd used Clinton more, he probably would have won, right? So that's Jizz Incident 1. Number 2, Hillary Clinton's main assistant, Uma Abedin, is married to Anthony Weiner, famously an incorrigible sex pervert. Weiner borrows Abedin's laptop to sext an underage girl, gets busted for it. But that causes the FBI to reopen an investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails because now they have this whole other laptop that belongs to her assistant. And and so they reopen the investigation 11 days before the election, costs her the election. Trump wins. And so that's it, all because Anthony Weiner had to get his jizz out. All right. Today, right? So everybody wonders, how can Kristi Noem's husband put up with her having this blatant affair for years with Corey Lewandowski, this scumbag who's also married? So it comes out today that Kristi Noem's husband is a big boob fanatic. He's in this world of people who patronize women who get enormous, I guess, saline implants. So their measurements might be like 70 around the chest, where, Busty might be 40. These women are 70 because they've turned them. And the husband has been posing for pictures where he has stuffed his t-shirt, giving himself enormous boobs with big pointy nipples. And these pictures just came out today. And so it's all part of this world of Kristi Noem's, cruelty and corruption and, and like sexual arrogance that she can do whatever she wants. She can, deport everybody for the smallest thing or for nothing. And meanwhile, she can just fuck around with impunity. And then finally, we're in this war of choice that Trump started in part because he did creepy shit with kids in Epstein world, right?
As a distraction.
Yeah, the war is at least partly it is because there are still 3 million Epstein documents or videos, just pieces of evidence that the DOJ is refusing to release. I think there were maybe 6 million pieces of evidence total. They've only released half of them. And have you heard anybody pushing? There's still a push to get the stuff released, but it's been buried for the past month under the war. Right. So our whole freaking century has been tainted by guys who should have just stayed home, quit not sex, just jerked off like a normal person.
Mhm.
Don't like get involved in a kid molestation ring. Don't sext 16-year-olds on your wife's computer. Don't like jizz on a White House intern's dress.
Yeah,
It,
you
it,
wouldn't
it,
think
it,
that a Rhodes Scholar would need to be told that, but he did. But
it,
he has like Monica Lewinsky allegedly, lifted up to show Clinton her thong.
Right. It starts when it started in the mid 90s, which was the golden age of thong underwear. They were a new thing, right? Used to be that panties, sorry, it's gross when a guy says that word, but used to be that women's underwear had full butt, semi full butt coverage. Thong comes along. Women who want to be sexy don't want lines under their and so yeah, it starts when Lewinsky lifts up the back of her skirt and flashes her butt in a thong at Bill Clinton.
And Bill Clinton, a Rhodes Scholar's IQ just dropped 50 points.
Well, Bill Clinton is one of those lucky guys who, like I had a writing partner who was lucky enough to be like, aroused by just about any woman in his vicinity. Lucky in that if you're a horn dog, that means that you can hit on just about everybody. Like, if you've got more exacting tastes, if only like 2% of women really turn you on, then you're not going to be doing what Bill Clinton and my writing partner used to do, which is hit on frickin' everybody. So all it took, to trigger Bill was the butt flash, and he was off. And he had noble sentiments. Yeah, he was a Rhodes Scholar, and he fooled himself that he was mentoring Lewinsky. He brought her books, and they had, I'm sure, all sorts of discussions about stuff. And he thought she was benefiting from the deal because she gets to have all this personal time with a Rhodes Scholar president who can teach her, introduce her to this world. But then she wanted more. She really wanted to, because she was a fucking, idiot the way, I was probably even more of an idiot when I was her age. I just didn't have the opportunity to exercise my idiocy because people stayed well away from me because I was creepy or awkward. But she did, what was normal for a 22-year-old young woman. She wanted to get really involved and said she loved him and wanted all this stuff. And then he, like, based on experience, was like, oh fuck no, I gotta back, this is gonna be a problem. And so anyway.
Yeah. But it's what we're really talking about is how society, we're sort of the Puritans were one of the first people trying to establish a moral ethic in this country, and the way that they believed was part and parcel. It's still alive in our society. It was that there's one way. Not very many people really believe this, but they're kind of get the sense that it's the right thing to have sex in marriage, in purposes to procreate, and that's the only okay thing. And then, of course, in the 60s, it was free love, and people were thinking that sexual freedom. And so, in between the Puritans and the sexual revolution, there was all sorts of behavior of all types imaginable, but it was just not socially acceptable, so it was hidden or tried to keep hidden.
And it depends. I did a little bit of research on how much banging there was in Britain over the centuries, and In London, proper people did not do extramarital banging because syphilis was rampant.
Oh,
So like 1/3 to 1/2 of the population may have had the syphilis, which
and they
is
tried to cure it with mercury.
right. And if you don't catch it early, the later state, it eats your face, it eats your brain, it eats your whole freaking, it's a terrible disease.
Yeah.
Right. So people, understandably, proper people in the big cities in England did not do extracurricular banging. However, out in the rural areas where you were less likely to catch it, where there were, less, there weren't filthy whores lining the streets, and there weren't libertine guys who were deflowering, then there was some huge percentage of women were already pregnant when they got married, because it was a more relaxed thing. If you were committed to somebody, you were more or less free to bang. We're talking 16th century, 17th century, because, all right, you're in a relationship. You're not going to give somebody a venereal disease. Go ahead, have at it. We're supposed to have babies. Nobody was particularly concerned. And we don't know any of this history. I'm sure, there are books on the history of sex. I've never read them. Probably some colleges at some point offered classes in the history of sex. I don't think they could get away with it now, because conservatives would say this is the end of the world. But sexual,
we know something.
What started me on this was just being weirded out by BJ's, where if you're in any kind of relationship now, there's going to be oral sex. It's just like a thing everybody does. There are some people, I'm sure, who, but for the most part, 90% plus of everybody does it. But then I asked AI, did my parents' generation do this? They're like, no, nobody did this. Nobody was having oral sex in a normal, an average marriage in the 50s, the 60s. And it seems just to be such a radical shift from 0% of everybody to close to 100% of everybody. And we know about the shift in the early 60s when the pill came out. Right. Nobody, nice girls didn't have premarital sex. They might do heavy petting, which is a euphemism for dry humping and getting jacked off, right? But not the full thing, because the consequences were bad. You get pregnant, the pill comes along in 1960. But for the first 2, 3, 4 years, you couldn't get a prescription unless you were married. You show up at your doctor's and you say, "Hi, doc, my husband and I, we're trying to, wait a little bit before we have baby." The doctor would give you a prescription if you could show you were married. It wasn't until 1964, 65 that anybody could get a prescription. And then after that, then it becomes the summer of love, and things loosen up. A huge flip in sexual behavior,
right? And,
which we, eventually benefited from. You and I were there to eventually benefit.
Yeah, there's no question. In my college experience, the women were empowered. That they felt empowered, and that way, and that was fresh off of that, wave of. We've been repressed for so long. We were told, to keep an aspirin between our knees or something like that. You reminded me when you're talking about old England. There was this episode of Sherlock Holmes with Watson and Holmes are taking a train in the rural part of the country. And Watson says something about, it's so nice to be out of all the moral impertitude of the city. And Holmes looks at him and he says, "There is so much worse going on in these rural communities."
Well, there probably was, but they weren't giving themselves diseases because they were fairly isolated.
They had fewer choices, yes. But it always reminds me, it's we think we know, and often we don't. And judging others has proven to me to be a basically a failure, because I've often convinced in a nanosecond what someone is like. And there's often a lot of deeper layers to an individual than you give them credit to. And sometimes when we have our minds made up and we think, okay, Rick Rosner doesn't like a Supreme Court decision, therefore he's pro-trans. That kind of thinking is just illogical, and I have had to give up on expecting people to be logical. This is one of the things that caused me a great deal of strife when I was young, because even teachers weren't always logical, and it always irritated me. It seemed to me that there was, some promise. I don't know why I thought this way, why felt like it was entitled to some sort of logic in my life's experiences. And I found little, a lot of haphazardness, a lot of, just thoughtlessness. And I think it is made worse, as you pointed out, by our technology addictions, and letting someone else do the thinking for us, which just makes someone like Trump a very powerful individual. Because
there's a ton of Trump regret going on since the war started, and gas hit $4 a gallon nationwide average for the first time since the war started today. And Trump has probably lost 5% of his support, which in terms of numbers of people is could be 1 million or 2, which is not nothing. 3, I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm pro reasonableness. And when it comes to trans stuff, the science has been changing. It seemed reasonable to me that if a kid has some gender lack of clarity, or maybe some clarity, the kid born biologically male claims she's a female, it seemed reasonable to me to hit the kid with puberty blockers to delay the kid having to make a decision about which way they were going to go. Because once you've grown like your adult equipment, it's harder to, so anyway, the puberty blockers seemed like a way to buy a year or two to think about really what your deal was. And it seemed harmless. Turns out, I guess now, according to more recent studies, puberty blockers are not harmless. I don't know the exact statistics, but they can fuck up your reproductive system, or I guess maybe lead to increased rates of sterility. So that means you have to change your approach.
Well, the one thing that I'm trying to get across is that, stop it. Someone wants to live their life a certain way. Stop hating them for it. Stop judging them. If they want to live a certain way that's not the way you live, let them live it. Because how is it affecting you? And it's affecting you only if you allow it to, So I'm much more open to people choosing the lives they want to lead, even if it's not a life that I would lead.
So, I mean, on the anti-trans side, anti-trans, the strong, the loud people on social media say, that you got to stop kids from having their tits cut off, from having their dicks cut off, and that doesn't happen, right? The people under 18 aren't having gender conforming surgery, except that in some cases they were, and in those cases you got to get in there and you don't want to absolutely shut down a department, even though that's what Trump wants to do. No trans care for anybody, but which is bad, because there are obviously a bunch of reasonable people trying to do reasonable things around, kids who have gender issues, but you absolutely don't want anybody doing any kind of surgery on anybody under 18.
Yeah, minors. Yeah, and I think that is a very reasonable position to take. And when we have these bans or no support, this is the kind of inhumanity. And you mentioned X, which is what used to be Twitter, and you used to say in Twitter you found this connection to other people, and that's what we're missing. We're feeling disconnected. We're hating the other, someone who is different from us. And this isn't, goes back as long as humans were around. If you were another other tribe, you might be dangerous to our tribe. And so, making the other, but people have done that in movies and in literature, and, the hatred of the other. And that's one of the things that Trump has managed to exploit, making the other, the immigrants. Of course, we're a country of immigration, and immigration is what made America great in the first place. But the idea of connecting to other people, and as you said, Star Trek was an example of this. Again, it was the 60s where we were breaking ground in this. It doesn't matter what they look like, Do they have a sense of decency? Do they care about other people, other living entities? And there's a bottom line that we can connect on, and we're so stressed out about keeping the other away from us and extinguishing them.
We're the same percent immigrants, that is people living in America who weren't born here, about 1 person in 6, same percentage that we were 120 years ago. We might be at 120 years ago, 16%. Now, like Biden was kind of loose along the border, so it maybe kicked up the percentage to 17, maybe even 18%. I'm sure it's back down now because that's the one thing that he did. The one promise he kept was shutting down the southern border. But we've always had a ton of immigrants. I mean, we're built from it.
Yeah.
But here's another issue, like where I'm reluctant to speak out, because that's a lesson I've been learning about more recently on X is I don't have to freaking comment on everything. Not everything, because it's probably a racist term now, but it comes from Brer Rabbit. You ever heard the term tar baby?
Yeah.
Tar baby.
And it is a racist term, but it was used.
Somebody's trying to catch somebody. It's a trick that you build a baby out of something sticky. And people come along and go, ooh, a baby. They grab the baby and it's made out of tar. And now there's no letting go of the baby. And like so many issues on X are like a tar or like a glue trap, I guess is a less racist. You ever seen like a rat caught in a glue trap? It's so terrible. No. It's really bad. I used to work in a bar and they used glue traps, and the adult rats were smart enough not to step in the trap. Baby rats didn't know yet, and they'd get, oh my God, it was bad. Anyway, because a rat will scream in a way that sounds pretty human. Anyway, a glue trap on X is anti-Semitism and Zionism and Israel, when Musk is a white supremacist, he's an a-hole. And when he took over, he's gradually, and then all of a sudden, he let back in like tens of thousands of people who were kicked off of X for spreading bullshit and hate. And that includes a ton of anti-Semites. But now there was already a high degree of anti-Semitism. But this war, the Gaza war, it's been going on for, I think, 2.5 years.
I've lost track of how long it's been.
It's either 2.5 or 3.5 years. I think 2. But anyway, that made the hate for Israel much worse, justifiably. Now, Israel had a good reason to go into Gaza after Hamas, but then they prosecuted the war in not a great way. And then on the West Bank, the opposite side of Israel, Israel's been acting like dicks.
It's
And
a hard
Netanyahu
government.
is a lot like Trump, a criminal guy who goes to war to distract. He's actually been in court for years being prosecuted for corruption. But anyway, like just a ton of Jew hate on X, and also a bunch of reasonable people who are like, fuck Israel for some of the stuff it does. And then you want to weigh in, but then you like, I'm Jewish. I hate that Israel is, so, contributing to anti-Semitism by, the way it wages war. And then, so like, I'll want to like comment or give a heart to somebody's, like, what they say about something, but then I go into their feed and then I see their what's called a noticer. A noticer on Twitter is somebody who notices that the Jews secretly run the world.
Oh, right.
Which is a gross like bit of anti-Semitism. And so like then I have to back away, and it's a freaking mess.
Yeah. So there, and it's a good check on yourself not to get involved sometimes, and because then your energy is sucked into it, and your conscious thought is robbed from you, and it's the only issue. And all of a sudden, you realize that you could have been spending that time far more productively in a way that was far more beneficial for you and for others. So that discretion, even at our age, we can still learn new things. And, I have learned that in my later adulthood, to not engage every time I want to.
That's a great lesson.
That trigger is still there, though. But
a lot of times my hands will be in the keyboard position. I'm ready to type something angry, and then I'm like this, and I'm like, I don't have to. Whose mind is this going to change? Nobody. It's just going to get me a bunch of shit from people I don't like, and
you don't want in your sphere of influence, anyways. Yeah. So meet people where they're at and say what they can hear, and everybody can get along much better than they do today if we're just more tolerant and more accepting of one another, despite our differences. Because what is similar about human beings is more important than what is different. And, if we stop looking for the differences and start concentrating on what we have in common, maybe we'll be nicer to each other.
Well, I've noticed, regardless of how obnoxious somebody is politically, everybody loves dogs.
Guilty.
So, like even the most despicable MAGA, they like dogs.
Yeah.
Here's some more. Here's just comments that came in the last couple of minutes. You're not just ignorant, you are dangerously stupid. And so anyway, I got to get in and
clean up the mess.
Just like maybe throw in a comment. I don't want to have to. I hate like just surrendering by deleting a comment.
Yeah.
But maybe I'll get in there and just say.
Yeah. Well, I try to clean up my side of the street, and that's all I can do. And but I'm not about to try to change someone else's opinion of me. I've given up on that. If they like me, great. And if they dislike me, that's none of my business.
Yeah, we are not young guys. So when I'll like COVID numbers along the West Coast, like I've been like not wearing a mask a lot lately because the COVID numbers are really low and the flu numbers have been dropping to the point where I feel okay. I'll keep a mask with me at the gym, and if some jagoff is coughing next to me, I'll either move away or I'll put on the mask for a while.
Right.
But anyway, but like, you know, if I were in my 20s and single, there's no way I'd wear a mask to the gym because that makes me look like a lunatic. And, you know, I would never hook up with anybody except maybe maybe a lunatic lady who's also in a mask.
Uh-huh.
But how would we do anything? We'd be afraid of giving each other germs.
Yeah, right. Kissing through the mask is not as satisfying.
Yeah. But at this point where I'm going to be 66 in about a month,
Uh-huh.
and I've been married for 35 years, like there's no being cool, you know.
Right. Right. Although I still use the cool emoji when I'm texting people.
What is the cool emoji?
It's sunglasses, you know.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And but you know, that's self-parody because the textee knows I'm not cool.
Yeah. Well, I do get sometimes a little annoyed with my wife for not thinking I'm cooler.
Uh-huh. Oh, I have a running joke about that in our household.
Yeah.
My wife
Sometimes
doesn't get me.
Yeah, I mean, I can reliably get a laugh from my wife by pointing out how awesome I am.
Yeah. Exactly.
I thought my testosterone was dropping because I'm weaker than I used to be. I had it measured. I've still got really good testosterone, and I was bragging about it to my wife. Completely not impressed.
Right. I had the same experience. I got my blood levels were all normal. Everything was normal. Wasn't high, wasn't low. And I came back and I said, I have proof that I'm normal. And
Yeah.
she knows better. Anyways, Rick, thank you so much for the show. We were able to
Thank
roar.
you.
And I'm going to take you offline and tell people why we still roar. All right, Rick. I'll see you next time.
Okay.
All right. The reason we roar is that there are core values that we all share if we're citizens of the United States. And these core values are being threatened. There is an existential threat to our democracy that's going on now, and we cannot tolerate it. We have to speak up, speak out, be heard. Because if we don't, then we're going to just get the government we deserve. So I want to keep you having enough pride in what it means to have been born into a country that values certain values. That's the core principles that have kept us together. And what's right with this country can fix what's wrong with it. So show up and use your voice and use your vote.